Hey everybody, welcome to Krystal, Kyle, and Friends. Today we're going to be talking to Johann Hari.
Yes, author of a number of best-selling books. You may know him from Lost Connections or Chasing the Scream. His new book is called Stolen Focus, Why You Can't Pay Attention and How to Think Deeply Again. All three of those books really worthwhile, but I'm excited to get into this one.
Yeah, so one of them's on the drug war and why he thinks drugs should be legalized, based. Another one's on depression and why he thinks basically modern society has led to a drastic increase in depression and how maybe the pills might be overprescribed. And the new one is about how none of us can hold our attention on anything for more than like 12 seconds.
Yes.
Which is kind of true.
And how it's capitalism's fault, basically.
Right.
Not just big tech, but also just, you know, the profit motive has sort of stripped our intelligence and our focus away from us in service of making us good little consumers. So get into all of that with him.
Yeah, really interesting guy. I think you guys are going to enjoy it. But before we get into that, there's a poll that came out the other day. Now, I will say the source here is Rasmussen. Rasmussen is well known for being a right-leaning pollster.
Sure.
Having said that, I don't know how, even if you like factor in the right-wing bias, these are still astounding numbers.
Well, and also I used to be a lot more skeptical of pollsters like Rasmussen, but then we've found out that the normal
in the Trump
pollsters,
years, they were actually a little more correct.
They were more accurate. I mean,
well, to be fair, they were terribly wrong in like 2012 with Romney.
Right. But now something
in the
is
modern
happening,
era,
and pollsters don't really know what's going on, but there seems to be an undersampling bias in regards to Republicans, and especially Trump-supporting Republicans. So all of that is a long way of saying it's worth looking at some of the data that they have.
So the question is, do you agree or disagree with this statement? This is amazing. The media are, quote, truly the enemy of the people.
Okay.
The results. So among white people, 56% say, yes, the media is the enemy of the people. Wow. Among the black community, 63% say, yes, the media is the enemy of the people. And then they have this category, other non-white. 60% say, yes, media is enemy of the people. The only one that didn't say it, Democrats. 37% of Democrats say media is the enemy of the people, so a majority say it's not. Unaffiliated, so like independents, 61% say the media is the enemy of the people, and Republicans, 76% say the media is the enemy of the people.
Wow.
And then when you look at all, like everybody, it's 58% that say yes, the media is the enemy of the people. So I was a little surprised by it.
Yeah.
But I will say, and you're not usually allowed to say this if you're a leftist, but I'll say it because I think it's true. I think they're right. I think the American people are correct. Now, the reasons why, you know, my diagnosis of it might be different from somebody on the right, and I also generally think that when, you know, like when Trump or some people on the right bash the media, it's because they want to tear the media down, and I think they want it to be more biased in their favor. It's not that they want the media to do a good job. I actually want the media to do a good job. So it's fundamentally a different criticism. But, I mean, look, I'll get to my reasons in a second as to why I think it's correct that the people are right. What do you think about it?
Well, just to further make the point you were just making, you know that the typical Trump right-wing criticism is flawed because they don't say it about their own outlets.
Right. They think Fox News is great or One American News Network is great or Newsmax is great.
Exactly.
And they're objectively the worst in the sense that they give the worst information.
And Fox has the largest audience. I mean, it is a mainstream network. It has the largest audience of all the cable news networks. And so if you're just like exempting them from your analysis, then your analysis is probably pretty silly. Whereas obviously, like, we're very happy to criticize Fox, but we're also see very clearly the project that CNN and MSNBC are engaged in. Are they the enemy of the people? I think you have to say yes, because literally their project right now is to convince the people that their friend, neighbor, uncle, brother who thinks differently than them is an evil, bad person, to distract you from, you know, the actual structural issues and the problems that elites in this country cause. And I think that is the root of a lot of the problems that we see right now. So if this is Matt Taibbi, this is Hate Inc. If you are listening to Fox, it's the liberals, it's the quote-unquote left who are tearing society down, and it's an existential threat. And if you're listening to CNN, they've got a different version of that. And, I think it's all very convenient for people in power and keeps any real sort of movements from change from actually having a chance at success, because people are so made to be so convinced that it's actually their neighbor that's the problem. So when I see numbers like this, I say, good. I wish that the number among Democrats was higher.
I think it will be in time, but that's my speculation.
I suspect this 37% of Democrats is already significantly higher than it was previously, when there was just total uncritical acceptance of whatever the liberal media line was.
Yeah, so here are the reasons why, I think. So first of all, the media, what do they call it? I think they call it the fourth estate, right? So it's like the bar is high. You're supposed to give people news, information, facts, data about the world. And then, like, in doing that, you should be holding the powerful accountable. And there's this saying from a few years back that I heard from Cenk Uygur, of all people. He says the media is supposed to be the watchdog of the people, the watchdog for the people, but they're the lapdog of power or something like that. Like they're a lapdog instead of a watchdog. And it's like that. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
So people know it's a really important institution, but they don't treat it with that seriousness. And so there are a number of biases. Obviously, for MSNBC, it's a bias in favor of the Democratic Party. Now, that's different from having a left-wing bias or having an ideological perspective. Yeah, it's not the same thing. It's fine to have ideological media. In fact, that's more honest, if you ask me. But they're biased in favor of the Democratic Party on Fox News. They're biased in favor of the Republican Party. And then you have just the general establishment bias, which I would argue cuts across all of mainstream media. They're all biased to one extent or another in favor of the broader establishment and the status quo and business as usual. And they also generally have this smug sense of self-importance as well, which, you could tell that they think they're elites. And that rubs people the wrong way.
Quality you could possibly have.
That's right. And compare that to take Joe Rogan, for example. Now, I have plenty of substantive disagreements with Joe Rogan on policy. But I think the reason why Joe Rogan sort of caught on and has these incredible numbers that are just through the roof is because there's an authenticity and an honesty there where even if he's saying something and he's dead wrong on it, he's honestly dead wrong. And that honesty part is the part that people, I think, care more about than anything else in many respects. And so when you look at the damage that
doesn't comport himself like I have spoken.
Well, exactly.
That's it.
And if you look at the damage that mainstream media has done, I mean, to me, the biggest one is you go back to the wars, and you go back to the financial crashes.
Yep.
So you go back and CNBC leading up to the 2008 crash, the subprime mortgage crisis, the Great Recession, when Lehman Brothers went under, you go back and watch, it's astounding what they did. They invited on the CEOs of all these companies which were currently imploding. And those CEOs were saying, I don't know, guys, calm down, relax, it's okay, keep giving us money, the market's going to go back up. And all the hosts said it, except for one, this libertarian guy named Peter Schiff, who was like, iceberg dead ahead, but he was laughed off air. So CNBC was flat out doing propaganda for corporate America at the time. And, I mean, this is the financial expert channel. If anything, they should have been the ones who were ahead of the story, but instead they were way behind the story and doing propaganda for the people who were making all the bad decisions. Take,
just the mouth of Wall Street over
That's
there.
exactly right. The bombing of Syria. Trump never got more love than when he bombed Syria. You had hosts go out there, I think it was Brian Williams, talking about the beauty of our weapons. You had other hosts saying, this is the day that Trump really became president. And they do this. They push for every single war. They defend the status quo. And I think that the negative impact of that makes it so that not only do they earn these numbers, they would earn it if the numbers were way higher than this.
Oh, 100%. I mean, Afghanistan's a perfect example. Invited on all these people, John Bolton, to pretend like they were so concerned during the Afghanistan withdrawal about the plight of the Afghani civilians, people that they had never once cared about during the entire length of the war. And then now that Biden, by their administration, freezing the assets of the Afghani government, they're creating mass famine with, huge consequences.
Worse than the war, arguably, Krystal.
Horrific. I mean, millions of people who are in danger of starving to death, including children. Not a peep. Nothing to say about it. I mean,
if anything, they support it, or they prod them further from the right.
That's exactly right. The minute, if there was any attempt to sort of ease up on that, they'd say, "Oh, why are you funding these terrorists? What, you're going to fund the Taliban?" It's like, you are intentionally starving the people of this country, people that a minute ago because it served Raytheon and General Dynamics and Boeing and these other military industrial complex contractors. A minute ago, you pretended to care so much about these people, but now that there's not a profit to be made for those same ghouls, well, now you don't care, and in fact, you're on the wrong side of the issue.
Look at the amount of coverage when they were screaming about how it's bad for Biden to pull out of Afghanistan, how it was nonstop melting down. What about the women? What about the girls? It was like a week or 2 weeks long of hair on fire, everybody melting down, everybody screaming, this is bad, this is wrong, this is terrible. The implication was you got to go back in, or you got to be more hawkish.
Yeah.
And then now, with literally perhaps millions of people either on the brink of starving or actually starving, all of a sudden, where's the concern for the women and girls of Afghanistan? All of a sudden, it's gone. It's totally gone.
Yeah.
So the final point on this is think of manufacturing consent and Noam Chomsky, because the idea behind is like the incentive structure is the problem. So the way it works in modern media is they only hire people who they know are not going to rock the boat too much.
Yeah.
There's a reason why Wolf Blitzer has roughly 17 hours on air in a day at CNN, because they know. I mean, he asked a question to Rand Paul when Rand Paul was like, maybe we shouldn't be arming Saudi Arabia. He said, well, what about the jobs? What about the jobs? What, the jobs for Raytheon and Lockheed Martin, people making weapons of death? I think we could find an economy that's not based on massacring babies. What do you think? So
you could probably work that out.
The incentive structure is the problem. And you have the commercial interest. You have the ad money that comes in. And, I mean, the corporations that are giving this ad money, they're the problem. Like, these are the people who've bought the government. These are the people who've rigged the rules. And so when you have the people who are the problem, the institutions that are the problem funding the media, then the media largely reflects the interests of those corporations.
Let me give a perfect example that came across my Twitter feed from Alan McLeod. He's got a screenshot of Politico. The article is, "Should the U.S. Rattle Putin's Cage?" presented by Lockheed Martin. I mean, perfect example. And how is this not considered a conflict of interest?
How is this not a giant scandal? I mean, every time, because Politico does this all the time.
All the time.
And all you see is like, left-wing shit posters that, pointed out on Twitter. And they're like, look at this. This is insane. The fact that, like, it drives me crazy that there's some ant sitting in the middle of Minnesota right now, 57 years old, sipping some wine, reading that article. And it might not even occur to her that this is grotesque. This is perverse.
Yeah.
That the people who stand to benefit from endless war are telling you what they think you should believe on war. Well, why would I believe them? They're the people who stand to profit if we go to war.
Should the U.S. rattle Putin's cage? I mean, what you're talking about, like, flirting with nuclear war.
Right.
With war between two armed nuclear powers. I mean, yes, Russia is not what they once were, but they still got a lot of nukes. This is not something to be, like, cutesy or casual about. It's pretty disgraceful. And I think one of the things that is always important to understand is, because I get this question a lot, you probably do too, like, do these people sincerely believe the things that they're pushing? And oftentimes the answer actually is yes.
Yeah, I think it's a mix.
For a couple of reasons. One is because they've been selected for those positions exactly because they're going to be a reliable voice for whatever the sort of powers that be want them to be. And another, this is the social set that they are in and the waters that they swim in and the class that they see themselves as part of. So they're in this bubble where nothing else penetrates. And, I mean, not a Tucker Carlson fan, but he's been trying to say, let's not go to war with Russia. And I haven't seen all of his commentaries. I don't want to co-sign everything that he said on this matter. But people are losing their minds over him trying to explain, like, here's a little bit of how the Russians may be approaching this. They're calling him a traitor and wanting him to,
they're doing the Russiagate thing, just like they did to Trump. Like,
absolutely.
Well, now you're a Russian puppet because you're saying this. Like, guys, this is the left-wing position. This is what Noam Chomsky says about the issue, for the love of God.
Right, exactly.
The one reasonable take, and all of a sudden, that's when they go after him the most vociferously.
The most intensely. So, and yes, I co-sign the enemy of the people pronouncement of the American people.
Yeah, and look, I don't want to say new media and independent media is a panacea, because it's not. Because, for every great outlet, you also have the Alex Joneses out there, and you have the crazy people who sort of work their way up through the ranks. And another problem you have with new media is audience capture, where you get to the point where the people will just start to tell the audience what they think the audience wants to hear, and they don't completely stay honest with the audience. And, that's a problem. So I'm not saying new media is a panacea, but what I will say is there are many more options and many more outlets in new media that do a much better job than anything you're going to see in old media, because they don't have they have different incentives, some good, some bad, but the incentive structure in old media makes it so that, honestly, the number should be 90% say the media is the enemy of the people. And I don't want to hear it because then, there might be a small percentage of people who are like, well, you sound like when the Nazis said Lügenpresse, lying press or whatever. It's like, not every criticism of the media is a Nazi criticism, is a far-right criticism. I just led the segment by saying, yeah, when Donald Trump rips the media, it's because he's mad they're not propagandists for him. He's mad they're not parroting his line 100%, co-signing everything he says.
Yeah.
That's a fundamentally different criticism from the criticism I'm making and the criticism that you're making, which is, look, all I want them to do is this. Put, facts, data, and information first, and then insofar as you have an ideological perspective, be open and honest about your ideological perspective with the audience so they know what your biases are, they know what perspective that you're coming from, and just you should generally have the mindset of, let me hold the powerful accountable and let me try to make the world a better place. That's it. That's all I want.
Yeah. We actually believe in the free press, unlike a bunch of these fraudsters. And that's why we want to see Julian Assange released.
That's right. That's a phenomenal point. Yeah. And I think if that story was more broadcast in a fair way and more people knew about it, I do think the number about the media would go up way more in terms of that, they're no good. Because it's this is your job. I mean, what was the story that just came out the other day? Oh, with Biden calling Ducey the lying son of a bitch.
No, wasn't it dumb son
Stupid
of a bitch?
son of a bitch.
Stupid
It was
son of a
stupid
bitch.
son of a bitch. And I saw the View's commentary on it was hey, it wasn't good, but he apologized and Trump was worse. They had this whole conversation about freedom of the press. Nobody brought up Julian Assange. Wow. Nobody brought up Edward Snowden. Nobody brought up the war on whistleblowers. And I'm sitting there watching it how do you have a whole conversation about freedom of the press and you don't bring up a literal political prisoner right now who's rotting away behind bars and you have nothing to say about it? It just shows that how elite they are and how out of touch they are, and it's a shame.
If you want, make it a hit on Trump. I mean, he's the one who started the prosecution. So even when they had the chance under Trump to really make it a Trump story about Julian Assange, they were more worried about this or that of their friends who had something mean said about them or a mean tweet about them or their press pass revoked or whatever.
So this is not a criticism of the View, but more of CNN and the big outlets. But oftentimes they have sources that are in the CIA or the FBI or the intelligence agencies, and they just repeat whatever those sources tell them. They do stenography for those sources, and they think they're doing news.
Havana syndrome comes to mind.
Right, exactly. But that's why you don't get accurate reporting on Julian Assange. It's because they've been told from their sources in the intelligence community that oh no, this guy's a traitor and he did bad things and people are getting hurt because of him or whatever. All bullshit. But that's why they say what they say, and it's disgusting because, again, you want to hold them accountable. You want to be a watchdog, not a lapdog.
Yes, very well said. So here's to those numbers continuing to go up of people realizing that the media truly is the enemy of the people. That brings us to our guest, Johan Hari, who I am really excited to talk to. His new book is called Stolen Focus. Let's get right to it.